feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming at you Monday morning, it's February 3rd, and the plan for today's show is to talk about kind of how the Western Conference changed overnight or over the weekend, and where the Wolves now fit within the new context of this Western Conference. I'm joined by Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And Jace, you wrote about this over the weekend, how it was after the Luka and AD trade, but sort of how this changes, through a Wolves lens, what the Western Conference looks like for this season and for beyond. But let's start with this season. Want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. I know the Wolves played a bunch of games this week, but and they just had a horrible loss to the Wizards. But my mind has only thought about this trade mostly, maybe a little bit the Kings trade, but still this trade. For the past 2 days, I would just be, I know I've seen it on Twitter and stuff. Mavericks fans are all about it, but I would just sit there every hour and be I can't believe that happened. But yeah, I mean, my immediate thoughts were just I don't think, and I know Dallas is a play-in team right now. But if Luka was truly going to come back in this next week, I do not think, even with Lively out, that they were going to be a play-in team. And I don't think if playoff time came around and Lively was back, at least, at some point in the first round or whatever, that Minnesota could have beaten Dallas. I really do think that there were two teams in the West that there are other teams where I think that could be a tight series. I think there'd be a lot of games that go down to the wire and then coin flip here or there, whatever. I don't think Minnesota could have beat Oklahoma City. Could beat Oklahoma City, and I don't think Minnesota could have beaten Dallas. And I no longer think that's true about Dallas. I really think the Luka point of it was really why they couldn't, because you just saw in the playoffs last year when the Wolves were the best defensive team by a mile in the NBA, they didn't have an answer for Luka, and that was why it was down the stretch, so many games decided in the last 10 minutes or whatever. Luka could get to whatever, and either he was getting to a spot, hitting a shot, or he was just throwing another lob because they had to overcommit to him, or, pass here, open corner three. Those guys aren't going to hit all of those, but they're going to hit enough of them. I didn't feel they really had an answer for him whatsoever. And Dallas was a good defensive team with that. And now I just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see how a team where it's what's your perimeter scoring? Kyrie Irving. What else?
That's
Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
That's it. Klay Thompson, what? I don't see it. I don't see how this is a deep playoff run team. They can say whatever they want about how this makes them better defensively. Yeah, you guys might be amazing defensively, but we've seen it. We saw it firsthand last year. Good luck winning every game 95-93. It's not easy to do. And that's going to be leaning really heavily on Kyrie Irving every night in the playoffs. And I just don't think, I think Minnesota can be okay, Rudy Gobert actually does a pretty decent job on Anthony Davis. And Jaden McDaniels, I think, does a decent job on Kyrie Irving, he did as that series progressed and they kind of switched matchups. And I think it would just be really tough for Dallas to score a bunch of points against Minnesota. And now I think it's that would be competitive. I put them in the same bucket as Houston or Memphis or whatever. It would be really competitive games. But I wouldn't hate Minnesota's chances at all now, where before I would have been okay, I don't think so. So now that just greatly improves your odds. If you're there's only one team I think that they can't beat, and it's Oklahoma City. And then everything else would be let's see how it plays out.
Right. I mean, I think about it, the only having Kyrie part as the most relevant part for the trade, just against the whole rest of the league, but also against the Wolves. In the Western Conference Finals last season, what really got the Wolves was the multiple guard looks that Dallas had. And even if you think about Phoenix's multiple perimeter oriented player look is different than Dallas's was now, in that Dallas with Luka and Kyrie use those two guys within action, including those bigs, which really confused the Wolves perimeter defenders, buried them in the case of, a Mike Conley, a Monte Morris, or whatever. And the Wolves, as great as their perimeter defenders were not a great perimeter defensive matchup against the Mavs, because there was two of them. And that's what changes in this matchup. And I don't know, maybe in another week or next Monday when we're doing this, Dallas has added another guard that's obviously not Luka, but another kind of person that the Wolves would need to guard within action and from the perimeter. Maybe that changes this some, because I am really intrigued by the defensive side of it, but like also be like, awesome, the ship is awesome, but there's a hole in the ship. Like there's no way like the ship is getting to the end of the ocean without, plugging that hole. That could happen. But I'm with you in the sense that it does make Dallas from a Wolves standpoint much more susceptible. Even if I kind of like Dallas now, maybe better against a Denver. I don't know if I like them better against I don't know if I would say better against any of them, but there's parts of what Dallas is now that I am intrigued by from a defensive standpoint. I just don't know if that's like all that relevant to a Wolves matchup. It's like, sweet, you got Lively and Davis for Rudy and Julius.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow.
You don't want them to have the ball anyways.
We're not letting Rudy Gobert get 15. Okay.
I know. Yeah. So it's
Go ahead. Like, I won't make this Wolves centric, but I'm sure people are wondering, like, what was your initial reaction to that trade, and what have you thought about since?
Yeah, it was weird. I was walking home from Target Center, and it's just like literally at the road at like midnight by myself, or close to midnight by myself. Like, I mean, obviously, as everyone did, like, is this real? That you're kind of like afraid to like put it into your friend group messages because you're like, am I going to be the first person to like put this in here that's not real? I mean, my first reaction was like, okay, Anthony Davis is worth almost as much as Luka Doncic, until you you get the confirmation bias of everything else. And I'm like, okay, so, and then you walk another block and I'm like, wait a minute, it's only Anthony Davis plus one first. And then, you get back into my place and start like thinking about it. I'm like, hold on. It took me a while, but it took me a while to run into the, wait a minute, why every other team would have given up more than this.
Right.
But I was genuinely intrigued by the Anthony Davis part of it at first. And I'm like, oh shit, like Anthony Davis, Derek Lively. Like I went down the good parts of it for Dallas first, but then I just got broken by the like, this is just terrible asset management. Like, and then you find out that they didn't talk to anybody else. They didn't. I mean, that's the I'm sure you were doing the same thing too. Like over the weekend, just like texting people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why did they do this? It's just like, oh no, like Nico likes AD. I'm like, so?
Yeah, I know.
Right? Like I was like,
okay, so why didn't he pitch Kyrie Irving? Like, is there any way we can do a Kyrie Irving plus blah blah plus blank and blank?
I don't
like would the Lakers have been like Kyrie Irving and PJ Washington for for Anthony Davis? Like,
but yes, that's the
whatever.
thing. It's like, were there other paths to getting Anthony Davis? Because we can do the.
It's not like this is my one guy, like that just shows like delusional, like that.
Yeah.
To put Anthony Davis in that bucket doesn't belong there, I don't think. But
yes, I agree. I think
not in the bucket of five best players in the world,
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
My thinking is just from a trade asset valuation of like, okay, couldn't have you, and I actually don't think this is how this works, but this is like the very like assets equal dollars equal whatever is, could have you traded Luka and turned him into 8 first-round picks, which then you trade into Anthony Davis. And I'm not sure that's actually how this works. This isn't like draft picks aren't exactly currency. And do the Lakers actually trade Anthony Davis for anything other than a star better than him? We could be like, well, the valuation is there and it's 8 first-round picks, but an actual practice, it is not currency. There are not price tags on this. This player equals that many picks. So I get that there's some of that. I just there was a price paid, and I do not understand the price of it. That will never make sense. And if you're Dallas and you're Nico Harrison, you just set yourself up for a situation of like, this has to work perfectly or I'm fired, and for a fan base, like, that's just stupid. That's a stupid process. I mean, they could win a championship and he will be fine, but the odds of that are not, that is not a good bet. And then what I feel for is the fan base who is now making that same long shot bet with you, and
they didn't want it.
And they didn't want to place
like,
that bet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's like to me, like my instant reaction was like, oh my God, what are they doing? I can't believe this is all you got, blah, blah, blah. What are the Lakers? Like they go long term, like, do they trade LeBron before the deadline here? Because LeBron and Luka, like as much as I want to see it for 2 months for like historical purposes, these guys playing together, like doesn't really make sense for basketball. So I hope they ride it out this year just because it would be like, we'd look back on it in 10 years and be like, those two played together. But
I mean, I think they absolutely will.
I think they will too. Yeah. I'm saying I don't think it makes sense, but I think they will. And I actually can't wait to watch it because it doesn't make sense in terms of like defensively and whatnot. And like they're both kind of in their own ways creators. So like LeBron's a pretty good off-ball player and he has to be. But they're so good that they might figure it out. And that could be amazing to watch, frankly. But I was thinking about all these things. And then I just started thinking about like basketball in general, like the league as a whole, all these things like, we talk about like asset management, and that was the thing about this trade is it didn't make sense for asset management and it didn't make sense for emotions. Like I don't think it made sense in either way, and that's why I didn't like it. We get so much into asset management that like you kind of do forget like the fan aspect and relationship and all of that stuff.
Sure.
And
well, I don't know. That's been on our minds all season. I mean, for the last 5 months since the cat.
Yes.
Trade.
Yeah.
I
don't. This might be a longer one, so I don't even know. Do you want to get into it right now? Like,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, I thought about this. Like, I think even in my mind, when Cat got traded, and seeing people as upset as they were, when in my mind I was like, okay, but everybody acknowledged all of Cat's flaws, right? Like everybody saw all these things and like some playoff duds and stuff. And like even, really good against Denver, but definitely some shortcomings against Dallas. And like, okay, what do you need to do? Can he get you over the hump? Like, and then you do see the salary cap thing. And that's obviously coming and you got to get off of that, move some things around if you want to keep these guys. And it does just become such an asset conversation. So I was a little surprised when people were like as hurt as they were, and then you see in Dallas and, like they were like at the arena, like, hanging up all these like Luka, I don't know, like tributes and whatnot. And like, all these things, like basically hating on Nico Harrison and like, like the casket they brought basically to American Airlines Center.
I didn't know if you were going cute or not. I was going to bring up the casket.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, but it's just like you see the emotion of it. Yeah. Like, and depending on whatever your emotions were, like people process things differently. People are mad, sad, all that stuff. And it makes sense, I think. It kind of really made sense of like when you are a fan of a team, especially a basketball team. I think like football is different. There are 53 guys. Sure. They wear helmets, big pads. Like basketball, it's very like it's just a jersey. There's 5 of you out there. Even when you're on the bench, we all see you. We see your emotion to every single thing you do on the court. Every time Ant throws the ball to Rudy and goes off his hands, like you see Ant's frustration. Like and it's many times throughout the game that you see him happy, sad, mad, frustrated, whatever. And there's just like a connectedness to it, and it's almost like one big story, right? Like it's like the story of the Minnesota Timberwolves is currently the story of Anthony Edwards. Like that is, and there are certainly subplots, different, supporting actors, characters throughout the whole thing, but people connect, I think, largely to the story of Anthony Edwards. Doesn't mean like, I don't know. It's kind of like if there's like Ted Lasso, like the story is about Ted Lasso. It doesn't mean there's going to be episodes about Roy Kent. There's going to be episodes about Jamie Tart, all this stuff. But the story is about Ted Lasso and you're kind of watching him evolve and grow and whatever. And that's kind of what we're doing right now with Anthony Edwards. And what made the Cat thing interesting was like for a while was the story of Karl Anthony Towns, was the story of the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, it just wasn't a bestseller. But
yeah, it wasn't a bestseller, but that was the story. And if you were a big Timberwolves fan, like that was the story, that was the book you were reading. And you were watching him evolve. And I think there was a lot of good feelings of like even when Ant came, like part of Cat's story was a little bit kind of merging off to the side and saying, here's how I have to evolve. And you watched him do that. And so then when that book just abruptly closed, like it's really like sad and empty, I think, of where you're like, I don't even feel like we got to the end. I didn't even see if it got to the end. And I think that's what Dallas fans are feeling right now of like, this book was pretty early. Like we had like, like it's like a movie and it's like 30 minutes in. Oh, they got to the finals and then they lost. But now we see him try to pick himself back up and like, okay, yeah, is he going to figure out I have to be even better defensively? I have to do this and this. Like, let's watch that growth. Let's see if it happens. Let's see if he gets back there again and triumphs, or if this does end sadly or whatever, or if he never gets there. But you just want to see the book end. But
that's the thing is Nico Harrison didn't.
Right, but I think from a fan's perspective, it's
I'm not justifying it. I'm just
and that's the thing of like, but what it. Okay, so I sent you the CBS Sports article. James Herbert wrote it. I thought it was really good. Just a couple of people who like really closely follow the Mavs, and one of them was, I think the guy's name is Ben Collins.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Ben. But anyway, he talked about being a Mavs fan, and he goes like, and he talked about how Dirk Nowitzki's journey genuinely inspired him as a human. He talked about, they trade Dirk's best friend, Steve Nash, and then Dirk gets to the finals, they lose. And then there's that year where Dirk wins MVP and they lose in the first round of the Warriors. So like his acceptance speech of the MVP is incredibly awkward and non-celebratory whatsoever. Right. And then Dirk goes through all these years of like, that's not a championship player, like you're not tough enough, can't lead a team, whatever. And then he does it. And then he does. And then he gets to the mountaintop. And I think the whole thing of like, it's self-fulfilling because you watched it. You watch the whole thing play out, the good, the bad, as a Mavericks fan every night. It's not like you just tuned in the playoffs like all of us did nationally, and we get it, but like we don't live it with him. And now it's like they're kind of doing that with Luka, and that's what you want, I think, because that, like, people in sports, it's like it's about connecting, and you feel like you do to these players. And I think when you do have these special things of like this, the story of the franchise, the story of this team you follow is the story of this player. Like the connection becomes so deep. Like they really do feel like they are a symbol of like your community and your like relationship with the sport. All of these things, like, Luka Doncic, I think felt like a symbol of Dallas in some way. And now he's gone.
In the same way as like a lot of like, or like when we were growing up is like, are you a Kobe fan? You a LeBron fan? It is like this emblem that you that you wear and you bring to your arguments, or you're like, I'm a Mavs fan, so Luka's my guy.
Yeah, right.
Versus, whoever else. It's the other. Yeah, it is the best players on the teams that you cheer for, you invest this time in, become part of you, or like part of what you bring to your social life and to. Whatever.
Kevin Garnett was that here. Kevin Garnett was that here. And that's why when Kevin Garnett went to Boston and won, like people
we were all about it.
Treated it like they won the championship to some degree, like not the same feeling, but like very celebratory because he was so much of that. And it's because Kevin Garnett was the story of the Timberwolves, like, and it didn't end badly because of Kevin Garnett or whatever. Like, and I think that's what's so special about these players who were with organizations for so long. Like Kevin Durant doesn't have that anywhere. Sure. Like, Kevin Durant's story is not the story of any one team. Jimmy Butler, for different reasons or whatever, but he's not the story of any one team. And I would even say like LeBron is the story of Cleveland because of getting them there, coming back there, like of the Cavaliers.
But in a different way than Kobe is,
but in a far different way than like Kobe is with the Lakers. Yeah, I agree. And so I think like these things, when these guys have this, like there's that special bond there, and no matter what, like you just want to ride it out with them. I think from a fan's perspective, like hearing these things, watching these clips of people in Dallas, and it's made me understand the Cat thing a lot more of like, like, hey, this guy, like he has these flaws. I don't know if he can win a championship or whatever, but like I think a lot of times as like a local sports fan thing, it's like, but this isn't asset management, like this is not that for me. I'm not like A plus B equals C, and like what's the best formula to get us to this ultimate championship. It's like these are people that you have connected with and seemingly like even through the television in the arena or whatever bonded with, and you would just want to watch their story play out, and you hope for you that it ends in a championship, but like you just want to go with that and watch the story. And when like the book just gets closed on Luka Doncic, you're like, what? Like I bet even if they somehow won the championship this year, I bet for some Dallas fans it would feel a little more empty because they didn't do it with the guy that they feel like they should have done it with.
Well, and I don't think even if you somehow look at it and you go, okay, Dallas's odds of winning the championship this season are 1% higher than they were before, as the fan, what you're talking about, which is your consumer of this product, would go, I don't need that extra 1%. I'd rather just say what this is right now, the 7% this is, right, rather than 8%. It's not worth that other 1% to me. And that is the disconnect between fan and general manager. And I think Nico Harrison obviously he's getting
roasted.
Yeah, somewhat understandably so. But I think if you look at who Nico Harrison is, or who is, I understand him to be, his career is like, he is so detached from everything that you're talking about. He's been an executive, at Nike for 20 years. He's one of those like executives who is so ingrained in the basketball community, like thus the connections that he made to bring in PJ Washington like a season ago. He's known Anthony Davis for forever and all that. Like, that's cool and that's valuable and that's like an important thing to have in the front office. But if that is everything, how did it get to the point where it only just goes through the prism of that guy? Because they're also like Dennis Lindsay. I was texting some people, like Dennis Lindsay was the GM last season and he's gone. He's in Detroit now.
Yeah.
Like, so when people point to, whoa, well, hold up, Nico Harrison knows what he's doing. Look at all the moves that he made that were all these smart roster and cap and financial decisions. From people I was talking to, that was like, that maneuvering was Dennis Lindsay, and Nico was this guy.
Overseer who's like, sounds good. Yeah, right. We should do that.
And that thing, I'm not saying that's an unimportant role, but somehow they got to this point where it is only Nico, and it is only the AD's my guy, and it's I'm sick of Luka, and he's not conditioned, and it's detached from both asset management and fan engagement, and I think both of those things are crazy dumb for business. Even as kind of interested, like I said, kind of interested in what Dallas looks like. In the immediate, but not in the long term. I could not make you a argument at all that this is a long-term move that is going to benefit Dallas in the long term, and neither could Nico Harrison. He's like, I'm married. So like,
right. I'll be fired way before that. Who cares? Like, legitimately, like, I don't care about that because I'm not going to be here anymore. It's like, well, that's what a fan base wants to hear, like whatever, like 10 years from now, I'm not going to be here anymore. It's like, this isn't, but this goes back to the whole thing. The Dallas Mavericks are not the story of Nico Harrison. That's not it. You're not the main character in this. I know you're making all the decisions, but like from somebody who these fans are consuming it. And it is there, and it is them, and it's been with them. Like, probably, some of them have probably been Mavericks fans for however many decades, and will be moving forward, or want to be, or probably don't feel like it right now, but will again, like in the story. And they're not gonna like sit back and just think fondly of Nico Harrison. Like, they're just not going to, even if they win championships, because it's not him. Like, he's not who they're connecting with. They're connecting with like the players on the court. They want to see, Luka Doncic fall down and get picked back up. They want to see, like, they want to be able to play back the Brian Windhorst after game 3, like, calm, blah, 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 blah. And then he comes back and like, and has like a couple great defensive possessions in the 2026 finals. And that leads him there. And it's like, yep, you doubted him, knocked him down. He got back up and he finished the job. Like, that's the story that brings like the most joy. Like, I really do think, like, as the Wolves won, that was great, blah, blah, blah. Like, you could see it. Like, people felt so good in game 7 for Cat.
Sure.
Yeah, they wanted the team to win. They wanted to do all these things. I think in their hearts, like, they felt so good watching this guy that they had seen, like, nationally tore down, have his own struggles, like, achieve. And I think that's a big part of, like, why people love teams and whatnot, and, like, in sports in general. And I do think we talk so much about schemes and everything and fit and how this and like what he can trade for this guy, blah, blah, blah. And the transaction portion of like the NBA is fun. But like, I do think like that has to be factored in probably a little bit more sometimes of like,
what's at the core?
Yeah. What are you? Like, who are you? Like, what is the makeup of like your team, your roster? And I'm not saying like that trading Cat was some like criminal thing from Minnesota. I don't think it was. But I now better.
That was the cost to it.
Yeah,
or that was a big cost to it.
And I better understand why people would. And I understood it some at the time, but like just seeing it again and reading some of these things again, it's like, yep, that all like clicks and it's true across fan bases and it's a big part of sports. And like I do think it makes it a little bit easier to do it when like it has transitioned here in Minnesota of like this in general still is like the story of Ant more than it was the story of Cat. But he still had a story here, and it just getting abruptly shut when like De'Aaron Fox, like that story was over.
Yeah.
Like that was it. I don't think Sacramento fans, like, even if you're a Fox fan, you're like, yeah, it ran its course. Like And that was even, even KG here, I think, felt a little bit of like, it ran its course, like this team wasn't going to do it with him. So it's, like a bit of do, and cheer for him at the next stop or whatever. But it's hard when you feel like it in no way was or should have been. And then somebody who doesn't mean a lot to you, a higher up position who, just doesn't matter as much to you as a fan as these players do that you connect with, goes, nope, it's over. And then that just leads the fan to be like, who the hell do you think you are, to do that, and you really do kind of feel like you were backstabbed or whatever. The same way you do if a player tells you, I want out of here,
That was great. Let me grab our first break. Then I want to get into Fox a little bit more. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And want to let you know that if you are trying to make Super Bowl plans, Falling Knife is having a Super Bowl party. It is a ticketed event. A ticket costs $50, but it is all you can eat. Rectangle Pizza is providing a buffet, includes Philly cheesesteak sandwiches, pulled pork sandwiches, all sorts of other stuff. You also, with that $50 ticket with entry, get either a pitcher of Tom's beer or 2 pints of their other beer. I think many of you have been to Falling Knife to watch Wolves games. They're going to go all out for the Super Bowl there as well. If you want to get tickets, you can. It's in the show notes below on YouTube or in the podcast app. Click on that. Be able to purchase 2 tickets. Watch with probably a lot of Wolves fans there. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. And today's show is also brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And this coming, I guess, weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the KFAN Power Trip is doing a takeover at Treasure Island where they are doing a live initials game from 7 to 9 p.m. on Thursday night. On Friday morning, they are broadcasting live from 5:30 to 9 a.m. From the Parlay Lounge where Kyle and I did our show there. And then it kind of just keeps going. Chris Hockey, who's part of the KFAN morning show, he has a show there on Friday night at 8 p.m. And they're giving away 2 trips to the Super Bowl that can be won at these various different events. So just the idea is a fun weekend at Treasure Island with the KFAN Power Trip crew, who I'm sure many of you that are listening to this also listen to the Power Trip. For more information, tickets, and the full schedule, just go to ticasino.com. I want to say one last thing, Jace, related to all that and the storytelling and the Nico Harrison and how we got to the point where that could even be approved as a thing, that the choice could become his, and the thought of what the fan base prioritized has gotten diminished. And I think part of it is economics.
Yeah, sure.
Where,
no question.
Like when we talk to people around the Wolves and they talk about it's the end of the season and kind of depending on how far they got into the playoffs, it's like, oh, did we make money this season or lost 27 million because 22 went to the tax or whatever. And those numbers are largely based upon like revenue, that their ticket sales and revenue that they have. And it's kind of fun, it can be, it's $20 million or something. So I don't want to make it sound small, but that is small peanuts in the overall economy that is the NBA right now, where the media deal is paying these teams so much more than what even having 41 home games sold out plus a couple of playoff rounds sold out would even be. So necessarily in a true market economy, it is everything that you're rightfully complaining about has just become de-emphasized due to the sheer mass of how big the actual money of all of this has gotten. And I think I don't really have my head wrapped on, but I'm just thinking about it while you're talking. And while this money just keeps going up, like the salary cap's going up another 10 next year, another 10 next year. And, Ant's next deal is going to be like 5 years, $500 million. Like, we are going to lose normalcy. We are going to lose, and it is going to become apples to oranges of like, oh yeah, man, when we were kids, Kevin Garnett, this was it just
right.
It was 20 years ago in a different, NBA economy. And I think part of this goes into the whole, the popularity of the NBA and the stuff that Adam Silver is talking about, and viewership and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, my first thing with that, to be clear, is always like, let's figure out the regional sports network so you like the fans would watch the games. Like, let's see if you figure that out, if you get some viewership back. But at the end of the day, what's being prioritized in the NBA is the top things that make the most money, and it does lose a connection to the story and the connection between the fan base to the best players. Even the Cat one, he is a casualty of the second apron.
Yep.
That the NBA put in place to kind of do this. And I can imagine when you're sitting in these meetings and you're seeing all this money just pour in, you're like, okay, well, we are going to choose the path that has that stack of money versus this stack. I get it, but it's not, I guess what I'm saying is, let's not pretend there aren't costs to that gain. And I think it's a perfect example of it.
Yeah, 100%. And that is where I do think, in general, you can only really prioritize one player in that way. Like, I do think, like, especially financially now, like you talk about the second apron, like we talk about like a story. That's why who is the face of the franchise? I always thought that was the stupidest question ever. It actually probably matters now. Because it's like, we can only protect one story here, like, just because money adds up, and it's like, we can't, like, multiple max players is like, well, now we can't do anything. Like, we're just so, like, our hands are so tied on, like, how we can even function. Like, forget about this tax bill we're paying. Like, we can't, like, re-sign this guy, like, add this guy. We can't do it. So, like, we can't do it. But you can do that with one guy. You can be like, this guy is our guy and he's not going anywhere. And we're doing our best to, like, prioritize around him. It's hard to do that with multiple guys.
Right.
It really is. Like, it's just, I do think, though, also, like, the money thing is a big thing, but, for a lot of these teams, like, it can come down to how much are you willing to pay, like, on that bill. And obviously, like, you're restricted certainly of, like, how you can act. But then otherwise it's like, yeah, this is a lot of money. So there is a benefit of having, like, an owner who, the perfect one is probably one that's a fan, but isn't like a fan where I'm running the team. Like I'm not going to be the one who's determining all the moves we're making, but I am in the arena every night. And I do get that same connection of, like, I feel and appreciate the magic of having Luka Doncic, or the beauty of watching Nikola Jokic, or the electricity of watching Anthony Edwards. And, like, those things, like, deep in my soul matter to me. Like, there's value in having that, of, like, I'll pay whatever for that. Like, we're going to protect that no matter what.
And which is not like the full Ishbia. That's a different thing.
Correct.
And it's different than the Vivek in Sacramento, where it's just like, I'm going to put my fingers in all these things, Not
like I'm intrigued in this, and it's like I'm playing the 2K video game, and I'm going to get this roster just right, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, it's understanding the value of everything around you, but still listening to the people who are like, okay, I understand your vision or whatever, like, what you want to protect. I get it. This guy is our guy. Here's how we feel. Here's how we plan to get this to where you envision it going, where we all envision it going. And him being like, okay, that sounds good. It's not exactly what I would do, but I trust you guys. Or him or whatever. Yeah.
And it's just a necessity. It's relevant. I think we're going to get probably some ownership news for the Wolves, certainly within the next week, but probably I think within the next couple days. And, we've seen what type of owner Glenn Taylor is. And I think, generally speaking, to this broader point of around the league, if you are an owner who's like, yeah, we're going to try and dodge the tax a lot, like, you are at such a competitive disadvantage in this league right now. And so if Glenn Taylor continued to be the owner in the way that he was for much of the past 25 years, it's not that you can't compete, but it is significantly harder to compete. So I think what we're saying is, in many ways, ownership has always been, they'd say, like, the biggest competitive advantage or disadvantage. And that probably only presents itself even further, because the money is bigger, but the holes you can sink yourself into, or the crazy you can kind of do to recalibrate, is even crazier than it ever has before. And it's going to really create this disparity between the teams that have the spending power and the logic behind the spending power versus the teams who either don't have the spending power and or are dumb, or not executing in that in that same way. I wanted to, it as a way to talk about kind of the Fox trade. I just want to talk about like the West in general. And we came into the season, and I was all like, man, the West is going to be this gauntlet. It's going to be this gauntlet. And
don't we say that every year? I mean,
honestly, we do,
like, you know.
And so maybe I'll put my foot in my mouth right now, but I feel like the West is now kind of what that, or is what we thought it was going to be. When you put a Fox on San Antonio, that makes them, you know, a different level team here. Maybe the spread of the Dallas and LA trade. I don't know. I was really thinking about it with the Kings trade, because I don't think the Kings necessarily get that much worse with that trade.
I agree. Yeah.
Right now. And then San Antonio gets better.
The Kings just stay duplicitous. Like really, I would watch them play on a night-to-night basis, and I'd be like, okay, I guess it's Malik Monk's turn to go. I guess it's DeMar DeRozan's turn to go. It's basically like, let's throw it to Domantas Sabonis and see whose turn it is to come take the dribble handoff and then go try to score.
Right.
Like that was literally like, you'd see like, how's he get 12 assists? It's like, well, he gets the ball and then dribble handoffs, and then one of those guys goes and shoots it. You know, like,
it is that. It really is that. So the Wolves, I have the standings up on the screen right now. The Wolves are, as we're recording this, 7th in the West, 1 game behind the Clippers for the 6th, and 4.5 games ahead of the Spurs for the 12th. And so now, I mean, the Spurs are going to come knocking into this playoff picture here.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say
I meant the play-in picture.
Yeah, no, even still, I'd say maybe. I mean, they'll probably pass. I mean, that was like adding a De'Aaron Fox is kind of like one of those big ones, right? Like to where like you're kind of changing who you are a little bit, right? Like you're going to do things differently, and there's a whole, and there's probably a little bit of an adjustment period. Like I think in general for them, like their talent level, like just adding a Fox makes their talent level deeper, and that was something where like they weren't good enough like 1 through 8 to be like a really good team. So they're better there, but like, I don't know. We see like these big pieces come in, and it takes some time oftentimes. And Fox is probably somebody who, you know, it's not like he's just like a Mike Conley kind of role player, like where it just kind of like pretty easily, seamlessly comes in. Like I can see that one taking a little time and having even a couple games to make up there. Like we'll see how the rest of the trade deadline shakes out, but I still think it's a maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. I do think the Spurs one. Well, what stood out to me is I'm like, okay, I don't think
I like the deal long term. I'm just saying the rest of the season. Like that's all. That's all is like, you know, like it's one thing if you're the Mavericks and you trade for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford to play alongside your star players. Yeah. And that can instantly. I do think when it's like you're trading for kind of a star player, like that can take a little bit more time. Like when the Dallas traded for Kyrie Irving, they sucked. You know, like, and it looked like this was the worst thing ever. It's like star players take some time.
Or Rudy.
Yeah, right. That takes some time. Exactly. It takes some time to figure out how to play with one another. So that's why I just want to like, as we like a caveat as we start this conversation. Yes, the Spurs might maybe make a play in, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if it takes them some time and it's like they didn't even make the play in this year. And I don't think it'll mean that was a bad trade at the time.
Yeah, I guess what I was going when I was like putting this together is like, agree with you. There's less clear contenders right now. I mean, we would have done it last week. We would have said the contenders in the West are OKC, Dallas, and Denver. I don't know what would have you said the contenders were a week ago?
That's probably about it. I can't get there.
Would have you done Denver? I would have.
Yeah, I would do Denver because I do think Denver can get there through the right path.
Yes.
I think Denver is path dependent.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So now it's weird. The contenders are down. Like you remove Dallas from that, and I agree. Again, in the immediate, I also feel like it's going to be weird if Dallas plays Denver. Like that's a bad path for them. I think Davis and Lively on Jokic could kind of be problematic in ways that, you know, the Cat and Gobert were a season ago. So it's like, okay, fewer contenders, are lesser top teams. It looks clearer that Oklahoma City is going to get there, but yet Oklahoma City still has some stuff to prove there too.
Yep.
But with this Fox trade and there's like a greater density to the West right now is what I feel about it. And not that I could see the Spurs going on some run and being there, but to the thing where it's like, man, every night in the West is going to be brutal. Like, I don't think that's actually proven to be that. Houston's having a really good season, But if they're the number 2, it's like, all right, it's not.
It's like when
It's
Memphis
not really
was
the gauntlet it was.
You know, like
Yes,
Memphis has
yes.
been the 2, I think maybe multiple times here, and they've gotten to the second round and lost in the first round, and they could have lost in the first round the Wolves year. You know, like that. It's that kind of 2. It feels like that kind of 2.
I agree with that. I do feel a greater density to it, which I think through that could lead to some weird team popping up and being in the conference finals,
like the Lakers,
like the Wolves. Yeah, Lakers 2 years ago, the Wolves last year.
Yeah,
I
know
the
Wolves are at least a 56-win team.
Yeah, you're
right.
The
Lakers was like, this probably isn't the West Finals team, but the route was very easy.
Right. I just didn't think they could beat the Nuggets. So
sure,
that's
right,
why I'm putting it there, but I was wrong, obviously, about that. I don't know. It some of this is very premature. We're gonna be like next week. Remember when we were talking about Sacramento or Dallas or LA in this sort of way, and then they went and got that. Like moving pieces here. Let's grade it once it's all done.
Mm-hmm.
But the Western Conference landscape has changed around the Wolves. It's still hard for me to imagine the Wolves themselves are going to change at the deadline in a massive way. So, like, do you feel ultimately better about the Wolves' odds of making a run now, or is it more likely that they get bogged down early on in the playoffs because the West is better overall, or they have a better chance of going further because there's seemingly less at the top? I don't know.
I don't think they're any less likely to get bogged down or more likely to get bogged down early. Like that would mean like in a play-in round, right? Like basically with who we're talking about. Like, yeah. And like, I guess if you're like the 7 and San Antonio gets to the 10 and then you lose the 7-8 and now all of a sudden you've got San Antonio in that second one for the 8 spot, like I guess that's possible. Maybe it's a better team. It's a scarier team that could come out of that 9-10 game than you would have thought it was going to come out before.
Yeah.
So that I think is like, if you're looking at the big West picture, that is probably it for San Antonio. Like they're going to be a play-in team almost certainly. Like if they went on a run to get out of that would be like, wow, I'm amazed at this.
Yeah,
I'm
5.5 up behind the Clippers.
You know, like that to play well enough while transitioning to a pretty high usage player. That would amaze me. But you know, certainly everything is possible. Everything's still, you know, on the table. But so like as in Cruising, like this is a better play-in team now. Sure, yeah. What do you think happens with the Lakers the rest of the way? Like, say LeBron is on this team, and I think he will be too. Like, say they just, you know, and this is probably like the best case scenario, and people are like, why did they get them? But let's just say like they got like a Robert Williams, so they have a center. They at least have one. You know, like what do you?
And I think they will. I mean, they'll round this out decent somehow. Like
that's my biggest question. I think of the whole West right now after that trade is like. And obviously Dallas could also surge, but like, are the Lakers more or less likely to protect their top 6 spot?
I think more likely. So I happen to watch the last 2 Lakers games because two ago they played the Wizards.
You're our foremost expert then.
Yeah. Well, so the whole like LeBron thing that he didn't know about it. Watch the last 2 Lakers games. LeBron was awesome. And okay, so 2 games ago against the Wizards, whatever. But in that game, the Lakers were like really low guys. It's kind of like the Wolves lose to the Wizards, the same thing. I mean, the Lakers had LeBron, but other than that, they're down a lot of guys. And it was like in the first quarter, like LeBron tone setter, which oftentimes isn't, you know, he kind of like lets the game come to him, sets the tone. They're up by like 30 after the first, and LeBron has a massive game. And then they play the Knicks at MSG on Saturday night, and best I've seen LeBron play in I don't even know how long. So it's like, I'm not sure that was just like a game at Madison Square Garden, you know, like I don't think that's exactly what it looks so different. And I bring that up to be like, the Lakers go as far as LeBron can fit around Luka, you know, or can be great around Luka, which isn't necessarily just great himself individually, but I don't know. It just,
is he going to be able to defend a little bit more? Like that is truly a question, you know, like LeBron, are you willing to expend a little more energy on that end? You know,
I think it's a lot like Olympics LeBron, like playing more like a 4-5 and I don't know.
Like, can we get some Luka LeBron pick and rolls? You know?
Yeah. Like, and so you got Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, I'm not sure how it's going to all, like how JJ Redick is going to implement all of this. And quite frankly, I've thought that much about all of it. But the LeBron element next to Luka and whatever, that the freak that LeBron has in this gas tank to bring with Luka, that could make something happen here, because I do believe Luka is like come the playoffs, probably the number 2 guy I would want other than Jokic. Like I think,
yeah.
I mean, it's close, right? But maybe I could go as high as 2. So how am I gonna?
Last year I was definitely at 2, and I don't think that just because like time passes that you would change your mind on that. Like,
but I mean, maybe
playoff basketball has been played since then. Like,
true.
I'm still at 2.
But Luka has, then it becomes how much we weigh in like the conditioning stuff, and it's like, okay, there's like 3 calf strains since then, and
so for this year's playoffs, sure,
I just having watched LeBron in those 2 games before this trade was like, I just think there's another gear to him that he's already kind of got going that is different than if we just watched a random Lakers game in November, which we did at Target Center, LeBron was really struggling earlier in the year. Like that's just not happening at this moment right now. He's playing his best basketball. And I don't think the timing of that is necessarily a coincidence. Now I can't pick him until I like what is the front court going to look like? I do think today's NBA is so much about what sort of answers do the Lakers have if they get the Nuggets in a first round series, or if they play the Thunder there. And I don't see that or have answers for you. But if they're able to put those things beneath the Luka and LeBron thing at the top, like let's not just breeze by the possibility of that, though. To the Kyrie point or the Rudy point before, typically this stuff does take, when it happens at the deadline, doesn't really kick in to the following season. With LeBron when he's 40, like, do you have time for that? Do you just go pedal to the metal? I think they do. Like, and try to win this season. It's just going to be about how that executes, and that comes down to how do LeBron and Luka fit in with each other, which is why we're going to be watching every single one of those games. Of like, what is this?
Yeah, right. I know. This is not turn this into a Lakers podcast either, but like, I do think like a JJ Redick is a really great coach of like, who probably got so excited and just was like, here's what we're going to do now. Not like where some coaches, like I hate to say it, some coaches would be like, here's what we're running, and then this guy will now slot into this spot and what we're running, and now this guy will go over here. Or JJ might be like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna run this and this and this instead, to best utilize both of these 2 pieces.
Right.
So I'm fascinated to watch the Lakers. Like, and I don't think they'll be able to get enough stops to like be a championship contending team. But like what they actually can do, if they actually can like beat somebody in round 1 or something that you didn't think so, like. Yeah, I think they could certainly do that if things turned right.
Yeah, and if they could just make it so Luka is the lone like problem defensively.
Yeah.
That's what has to be approached in however else they're going to add to this roster, after the deadline is strengthen all of his weaknesses, and don't play other players that do have weaknesses. Now, like Jared Vanderbilt looks like a big part of this team now, and you're like, okay, well, is that, is he going to spot up in the corner? Like, what is this going to all look like? I don't know. I don't know how the Lakers all.
Well, what would be your thoughts on that, Dane?
Still not going in very much. Okay, I do want to do one kind of just Wolves.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
One more
well, just like, I guess we didn't really get into it. Like, what do you think the Spurs could be the rest of the way here? Like, you didn't. I just kind of cut it off.
The Wemby stuff. If you like, you and I you watch full Spurs games, like Wemby is so good right now while still being so bad at a lot of things.
I agree.
Which
like
is like
terrible approach. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are we
twisted around?
He doesn't even know he doesn't know what he's good at still. Like,
sometimes, and he's still awesome.
Yeah,
it's still awesome. And what's happening is like it gets this. He's getting more mature. He's well-rounded. His game is rounding out, and there's a little bit less and less and less of that over even game to game. And I do want, there's sometimes with players of that age, like sometimes like a dam breaks and it is like, you know, and those rough around the edges parts of a young player's game don't totally disappear, but just some of the sloppiness is removed. And I know last season, or my opinion was last season, a lot of Victor's sloppiness was a product of lacking true guidance of a point guard. And they got, you know, obviously some of that with CP this year, and that has led to less of the Victor sloppiness. And I do wonder if that dam breaks, plus you have Fox in, who I think is awesome in like that, like not as your top guy, but in this sort of, I think he could be awesome. And I kind of like the wing players that they like have around them. A Vassell guy, I think they have shooting around him. Castle, you know, is young and intriguing, and there's some missing shooting there. There's some missing shooting with Sohan. I think they're probably light on that overall. I don't think they have the perfect roster configuration, but with players of Victor's ilk, like Luka's, like Jokic's, there are a lot of things that those type of players can come over. And I am probably again doing the thing where I think it's going to click in quicker than it probably will, but I don't want to rule out the possibility that could happen. In the last 15 games of the season, we were like Spurs, you know. I could see that, and that pulls them maybe even out of the play-in that we're talking about. And do they get to a 6 seed? And that's the part that I think is relevant to the Wolves. Do they just pass up the Wolves in the standings? I don't think that's out of the question, or a lot of those teams.
I do think it's relevant. Like you talk about that play-in thing. Like I think that's where it's most relevant is like if you're like the Wolves and you finish 7 or whatever. Now the Spurs finish 8, and you're like, oh god, you know, like, and they're white hot, you know, like, and now it's like, oh, and then you drop that, and all of a sudden you are the 8, so you're playing to play against Oklahoma City in round 1, cool, and you have to win a game to get there, and then it's like, well, now this season, like, it looks like it's heading towards a dead end, you know, like, not that a Thunderbolt series wouldn't be fun in its own way, but like, it would feel like it was heading towards a dead end, and it's because where if you're the 7, and now like you're like, oh, we have the Rockets, and if we win that,
sure, that's a totally different thing.
We have the Rockets in Memphis, and now we're in the West Finals versus we lost in 5 in round 1 and we suck. You know, like that's like.
Do you get that? That's what I'm getting at as my difference of how the West shakes. Like it sometimes is as simple as one of those teams or one more team above you that pushes you into a playoff
8
series.
7, yeah.
In this case, 8 instead of 7. To me, and with the Wolves in particular, is a massive difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so what if the Wolves get swept by the Thunder or losing 5 in the first round,
I mean,
rather than beating the Rockets in 7 or even losing to the Rockets in 7?
We've seen this. The Rudy's first year, they were not good. They went to overtime with the Lakers in the first playing game, and then the Lakers went to the West Finals. Like we've seen it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the Wolves definitely would have beat Memphis and Golden State, but they could have. You know, like they absolutely could have. And instead they played against Denver and lost in 5, you know, like we've seen it. We've seen how much this can matter. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from that perspective.
Yeah. I wanted to bring that up. And I think why this is relevant, like right now with the Wolves, is they're really injured. And so there's this like stretch, and it's a bunch of home games here coming too, when they're pretty decimated by injuries, with DiVincenzo out for an indefinite period of time and Julius Randle. I mean, we haven't got an official timetable. What was Finch's words? More than a few days.
Yeah, more than a few days. Yep.
Yeah, which sounded, but was pushing to like weeks is what it kind of sounded like. And it's a groin strain. So you're lacking that. Now, Naz Reid, you know, he hurt his finger in the last game. And in the locker room when we were there, his hand was heavily iced and wrapped as he was leaving. Like this Wolves group is like kind of decimated right now. And it's why they lost to the Wizards on Saturday, which I don't think is ever like an acceptable thing, but
agreed.
That's the why behind that. And it sounds like Ant is at shoot around this morning and he's dealing with an injury. So that just brings you back, obviously, a lot of offense. But we've also seen this season where teams are like, all they have is Ant. And it is
he's dealing with illness.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said injury.
illness. Sorry.
That he's not dealing with an injury. If you're listening to this, you're like, what?
Yeah. Sorry. Dealing with an illness. So, but assuming he's back, so he's going to take up a lot of what's missing from Randle. But I think it just leads teams to sell out even further onto Ant to taking that away, to let the other pieces around Ant beat them. And those pieces, as they've been very important all season, would be like, oh my God, Jaden McDaniels can't make a corner three. Rudy can't catch on the roll. Like all of the Mike Conley needs to be more productive. I think all of those things need to happen right now for the Wolves to remain relevant in what I think is, I don't know, I keep saying dense, but like a more dense Western Conference. I think replacing Randle's production is going to be huge right now, at least until DiVincenzo or whatever comes back. They need something right now.
Yeah, and it's like there will be games where when Nas plays and like they just play with this great rhythm and Nas is knocking down threes and you're like, this is unstoppable. And there will be other games where it's like clunkier and then you could really use Randle's like manufactured 22 and 7, like that all like it is nice to have both. Like Dante DiVincenzo said earlier in the year, like, yeah, ball movement, but then we've also got these ISO guys. And then he later on said, like, well, we always need movement in our offense, but like, especially like certain nights against certain opponents and whatnot, like you can skate by with bad if you just have guys who just like are wired to produce one way or another. And the fewer guys like that you have, the more likely you are to just kind of like stumble over anybody because all of a sudden now it's like, well, nobody's hitting shots and just kind of gets stuck a little bit and there's nobody to make something out of nothing. And now all of a sudden this game's way closer than it should be. And like the Washington game, like, no, you don't even necessarily have somebody to turn to, it's, and like, we just pointed out that West playoff picture. You saw it. Like you said, the Spurs could be coming, blah, blah, blah. Like you can't kick away too many games. You just can't.
And so they need to find something without which is in many ways going to be a new identity, kind of, because Randle has been such a big part of their offensive identity. And I mean, we've had these conversations a bunch already this season about like backfilling. If we've talked about it in Randle's traded. Okay, Nas moves into the starting lineup. Cool. Who becomes Nas Reed? Right. And that's what the Washington game like highlighted was that is a hole. Like, I mean, when we talked to the players of the locker room after the game and we brought up the not like Nas getting hurt part, they were kind of
were all like, yeah,
well, what do you want us to do at that point?
Nas
like,
got hurt. Yeah, like what
they all laughed. They all laughed. We're like, yeah, so Nas getting hurt was pretty sweet. They're like, yeah, dude. like, like that, that
you
makes
can
the
see
difference.
it. Like it was supposed to be a focal point, like it was supposed to be what they leaned on, and then he was out and they were like, now what? And I think that's where Finch then was like, let's just do a bunch of guys running pick and rolls with Rudy. Who's that? Let's do Joe and Mike. Like it honestly looked like that. Like
so, okay, so let's. I mean, we don't have to go that much longer, but let's talk a little bit about that in the because I think this is
that was a big takeaway from the game.
Was that Finch is going to lead on the older guys, like and Rob Dillingham didn't play in the fourth quarter, which I've definitely skewed towards the side of like, okay, I think Rob should be playing a little bit more, but I haven't been like the outrage. Like this makes no sense to me that he's not playing 25 minutes. In that game, I was like, this doesn't make sense to me that he isn't playing 25 minutes in this game because as simple as it seemed like they needed more offensive creation because you're out Ant, Dante, Julius, and Nas. And Finch opted not to do that and opted to go with the like, all right, we're just going to try and play defense and score just enough. And how we're going to score just enough is by bringing back the 2018 Utah Jazz with Joe Ingles, Mike Conley, and Rudy Gobert. And a lot of people don't like that. I get it. I want to bring it up as like, this is what Finch does. And it doesn't make him a bad player development coach, right? But this is what you and I were texting about this weekend, where it's like, man, the Phoenix game and the Utah game are actually a great example of Finch developing some players well, and when giving Jalen Clark an opportunity, them being able to take it and run with it. And I don't think it's that Finch is like let go of the young guys. He's just always going to have a proclivity to play the older guys. How do you kind of feel about, I mean, we know that about Finch, but the last week was interesting from that standpoint, right? Of like, you gave the young guys the opportunity, won the Phoenix and Utah game, and then kind of lost the Utah game without the old guys, but you didn't have Ant. Like, I don't know. Where's your head at on all that?
Yeah, I truly don't think that he thinks Rob is ready for more than the role he has. Like that's kind of my read on it is like, yeah, like I'm comfortable with Rob in this role. Yeah. And I'm not comfortable with him playing more than that role, no matter who's out. Like this is his role. I think I've texted about it like a Jaden Hardy last year for Dallas. And like there's a ton of value in that. Like X factor, like 12 to 15 minutes, whatever, like can get you some key buckets where you're like, wow, and that really kind of boosts on the offense when some other guys are not on the floor or whatever. Like I definitely think it seems like he's coming around to the idea of like Rob in that role is valuable for us, but I don't think, and I'm not sure this is going to change all year, that he thinks Rob is ready for more than that. Doesn't mean he doesn't think he will. I don't think he thinks he is right now. That's kind of just been my read on it. And it's like, so no matter who's out, then that just means more minutes for A, B, and C. It doesn't mean more for Rob because Rob's in a role we like him in right now. That's been my read on it. And you could be like, well, now this guy's out. It's got to be him. It's like, nope, we like Rob at this role. I really do think that's kind of where they're at with it. Because it's not like you wouldn't, yeah, like yes, we saw it against Phoenix and Utah, but we saw it still like within, generally speaking, that minute load. Like and it didn't change against Washington.
And
even
Ant
when you
played. And Ant played off him.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And you didn't. It didn't change against Washington. It just felt like it should grow, and it didn't. Like that was kind of it. And that's where I think that's where I'm settled in on. Like I just don't think it's going to grow. I think that's my read on it. Now I would have played Rob more like at least in the sense of like at bare minimum. Either when Joe subbed out for like 90 seconds, and I don't think they scored in those few possessions because like it was a pretty Joe-centric offense, and then or like giving Mike like a couple minutes there, and just a blow, and then you put Rob in, and you see if he sparks it, and then maybe you keep letting him go. And if he doesn't spark it, you just put Mike back in like as an original plan, just to have him sit a couple minutes so he doesn't play the whole quarter. That's where I would be at, but I'm guessing that's kind of where his head's at. I think it was mismanaged a little bit in that fourth quarter, but and I'm not even saying I don't understand it. I can understand how you can get there. I definitely think when you're that shorthanded, I would lean more into Rob, but I understand. I think that he just wants to keep him in like, this is his position on this.
Yeah. So I think it's that 15, 16 cap, whatever, minutes per game. But the other part of it, what Finch has totally showed his hand is I'm always going to prioritize defense over offense.
Yes.
And I even think the Luka Garza example of that.
Yeah, you're right.
Was stood out to me. Cause like, I mean, Luka was 0 for 5 from the field in the first half. Like he was struggling, but I remember I watched like the 5 shots. He missed 3 threes.
Yep.
That were like open. It wasn't like, don't shoot that 3. Luka's always got a quick trigger, but like
they were not like, what are you doing? I remember that on all of them.
They weren't. And then he missed 2 of his hook shots in the lane, or little push shot sort of things. So I'm like, well, if you can't trust Luka to do those things, then you just don't trust Luka. And the reason he does, and then, he didn't really play him in the second half either, is just, he doesn't trust his defense. But I just thought that was so telling, because I don't think that Luka missing 3 threes or missing 2 hook shots in the first half is indicative of what he's going to do offensively in the second half. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like Luka was going to take those same shots in the second half if he gave him an opportunity. Like Luka hasn't seen a touch in his life that he doesn't like. Like that's just his game. But so what that just screams to me is Finch is like, nope, we're just gonna lean into defense and control. And it seems weird to say that bringing Joe Ingles in would say he's prioritizing defense is that because Joe got blown by a couple times and there too. But it's not just defense. It's like the control that comes with defense. Get a stop, secure a rebound. We're going to play in this action, and it's going to be ping, ping, ping. It's going to wind up with Mike Conley in the corner. That happens sometimes. Just they needed another primary scorer. So I would have liked, could you get Rob Dillingham out there if you want to use like, can he be Jordan Clarkson next to Ingles, Conley, and Gobert?
Right.
That's what I struggle with there. But my biggest takeaway, if we're just talking about what it was, is to your point, the cap on this is the role that they want to play Rob in, and they're always going to skew defense versus offense. We can disagree with it, but that's just it's the 50th game of the season tonight. Like this is how Finch coaches, and this is how they play. And I wouldn't assume that changes for the rest of the season.
If they got hurt enough, if like another guy went down, I truly believe Jalen Clark would be more likely to play 25 minutes than Rob Dillingham.
Wow. And
I mean, just
because
you know, because you said, I think they're just going to lean into like defensive, like, okay, we know exactly what we're going to get out of Jalen, and you can say like, oh, I think I know exactly what you're going to get out of Rob or whatever, but there's just more. Like, that's just where
I think
just
they
think
do know what they're going to get out of Rob, which would be like some defensive shortcomings and probably some turnovers, along with the possibility that he could have 19 points and 8 assists or whatever.
Right. Yeah. It is like, you know, the Rob part is like, you know, the one, if you're going to defend Finch, is like, well, it's not like, you know, you lost by 2 and it's like Rob was a 0 in his plus minus. You know, it's not like you're like, and you were cooking him when Rob was out there. Like, I remember it was like, it's like, it's not even like the defense is Rob's fault either. A lot of times, but you know, it's just kind of the effect of like, okay, but he's the one who's then guarding the other team's worst player. And so then now this guy has to guard this guy. Now this guy has to guard this guy, you know, and it's like, oh, Rob, I tweeted it. I was like, I thought he played some awesome offense in the first half. I really did. I was like, oh, he scored or assisted on like 9 of the last 12 buckets. And then you look and it's like, well, he has a -1, you know, and it's like, again, that's not all his fault. It's like, well, Kyle Kuzma's just raining down threes. It's just the constant dichotomy, I guess.
Yeah, no, it'll be what will be interesting to see who plays tonight. I mean, I would assume Ant will. Yeah. Nas we'll see with this. We're assuming no Randle and DiVincenzo, but I bring it up to be like they gotta find a no Julius Randle way to play. And I don't think it's like this team can't have that. They didn't have it against Washington because Nas got hurt.
Right.
They did have it in the second half against Utah. Because Nas played and was, you know, was awesome, and he has his gravity there. Like,
it's easy to play offense with Nas. That's true. I mean,
yes.
like we've just seen that for years now. Like, it's easy to play around him because of the things he does, the way he moves. It's not just the spacing; it's his movement as well. It's pretty consistent.
Let's wrap this up because I did 2 of my prize picks from the Wolves Kings game. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. 2 that I like for tonight. I'm going to say Domantas Sabonis has more than 41.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I think that opportunity is certainly there. And then I had Ant's number. It just was kind of high in points, 30.5. You know, they're going to put 2 on the ball on him all the time. That maybe makes assists attractive to me. From an Ant perspective, I think maybe he does get more than, 5.5 assists, but just given the illness and some of that stuff, I'm just not expecting a Ant having more than 30 tonight. Obviously, could be proven wrong, but those are the 2 that I like from Wolves Kings tonight. Do you have any prize picks?
What? I haven't looked at this. I picked 2 out, but it wasn't this. What is Jaden's rebounding number? Have they adjusted that to like reflect who he is now?
His rebounding number is 6.
I'll take the over on that.
Okay.
My other ones,
it has been lower than that. What used to be like 3.5.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah. But I was going to have Mike Conley assist, but you already have. Yeah. Okay. I understand that. Originally I had Mike Conley assist and Domantas Sabonis assist, but you can't play Sabonis twice. I put the over on Sabonis assist, not having the ball very much. But I do think like just in general with Randle, I could see Conley's assist number, which I already have been okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like going up just more frequently. It's flirting and like just sitting in the 6-7 range more consistently.
Well, and I think Mike's just going to play more.
Yeah, that's true.
Like so that's just 1.25x whatever, you kind of got his numbers. I like 5 assists for him there as well. So that's 4 from Wolves Kings tonight. I had Sabonis more than 41.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. Ant having less than 30.5 points. We can go with Jaden more than 6 rebounds and Mike Conley more than 5 assists. How that works is, if there's 4 players on your board there, you can do, if you just did $5 on that, that's 5 to win 50. Or you can do a flex play, which if all 4 hit, you get 5 to 1 on that. But if only 3 hit, 1.5 hit, or you get 1.5 times on your money. I kind of like doing those ones. So if you just miss one of them, your whole thing isn't dead. But check out Prize Picks. We'll give you some Super Bowl ones later in the week too. That just is a fun thing to have going there. If you don't have a Prize Picks account, prizepicks.com, Prize Picks app. You can use promo code Dane for a $50 sign up bonus. I think it's a fun week to play this with the Super Bowl. Jace, anything else? We miss anything?
No. We covered everything.
We covered the whole NBA.
Yeah. That's right. We went league wide.
Tried to. I wanted to.
A national basketball podcast.
Yeah, right. Well, I wanted like everybody got their initial reaction. Like Bill Simmons has already done like multiple Luka podcasts, and I do. When you were texting me too, it's like there is an interesting element to this for how it impacts the Wolves. I think there's an interesting element of how it impacts Denver. Maybe helps Oklahoma City in some ways, but these are all theories, right? These are all theories. We have 48 hours after the trade, and in another 72 hours, right? Like there's going to be some more shake, and that's why the NBA is fun. I want to do the thing which I didn't do a good job of remembering, that like you get these guys in your team, and it doesn't mean they're just like the actualized, maximized version of it. Because my head always goes that direction, but this is and
then when it doesn't turn out well right away, you're like, actually that trade sucked. And it's like we've seen multiple examples now of like, the Irving Gobert, like that's not the case either.
Right. Yeah, it is. Some of this is just takes time, but it's gonna be something fun to watch and fun to track. I appreciate you doing this today.
All right, man. Always fun.
Maybe see it. I'll say I see you at the game tonight. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah.
So next up is going to be Chris Hine and I are going to record on Tuesday morning off of this Wolves Kings game. His book also is up for pre-order, so I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Plenty to happen. Hopefully we'll get Britt on before the deadline too. This is crazy week. We'll try to abide by a schedule, but might be some other things that pop up over the course of this week as well. Until Tuesday with Chris, he's Jace. Follow him on Twitter at Jace Frederick. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until tomorrow morning. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, Don't let standards ever bring you down,